Welcome to Nagarro's Product Leader series. This is our second episode of the series, and we are really thankful for Matt for making the time. And I will introduce Matt in a bit. Before we get started, I've got a couple of housekeeping things. Maybe, I'll just introduce Nagarro for folks who don't know about Nagarro, and as well as, just, talk about the series itself. Okay. Again, excited for the second episode of Product Leader series from Nagarro. This series is a curated conversations with practitioners like Matt and others who are shaping how modern products are built. I'm Pratik, partner and director at Nagarro, co-hosting this episode along with Hugo Froisch from the sunny Portugal. And we have a global team of people joining as well from across different parts of the world. So welcome again. Before we jump into today's topic, a quick intro about Nagarro. We are a global digital engineering and technology services company working with some of the largest enterprises across the world. What we are seeing in that what we're seeing is that real opportunity with AI is not just adoption, but embedding intelligence into how work actually happens. Today's topic is one every product team is wrestling with. How do we stay focused on real customer impact when AI is changing what's possible almost daily, if not weekly and monthly, right? To help us cut through that noise, we are joined today by Matt LeMay. And for those of you who don't know Matt, Matt is very renowned author of Impact First Product Teams, the book, and he's also written other books. You should check them out. Product Management in Practice, as well as Agile for Everybody. He spent the last decade helping organizations from startups to Fortune 500 build product teams that ship outcomes, not just features. Okay, that's a quick intro, but I'll let Matt introduce himself. There's a lot he manages, so I think to do good justice, I think I should let Matt introduce himself as well. Okay, before we get started, I think on the right side you should see a Q&A option. I think you can ask questions during the sessions. Just leave your questions there, and Wamsi, who's working in the background, will help us moderate the questions and highlight once we get through the initial session. And today, with that, Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I am so happy to be joining you today from uncharacteristically sunny London. We're having a nice day, but I'm here in my office, enjoying the sunshine secondhand, which is how I like to enjoy the sunshine. I'm really excited to talk with you. Let me share my screen so you can see what I am talking about. This is going to be a fun and fast paced talk, which should be good. Hopefully, you can all see my screen now. Great. So, as Pragati mentioned, my name is Matt, and I have spent the last 15 years helping focus teams on work that really matters. I've done that through the lens of agile transformation, through the lens of product management, and most recently through the lens of business impact, helping teams focus on work that is actually going to deliver a meaningful return on the business. Because, as I think many of us have experienced, there's always more work to do than there is time to do it. And finding that stuff that really matters to not just focus yourself on, but focus your whole team on. That's so much of what makes product management a valuable and important discipline. I'm here talking about AI, and I think the conversation around AI is obviously changing very quickly and is also getting more urgent, right? According to MIT's State of AI and Business report for 2025, 95% of Gen AI pilots are not delivering measurable financial impact. This was a really interesting study because they actually kind of went a little deeper. This isn't just self-reported data, and looked at, okay, is this actually affecting the P&L? And in 95% of cases, it was not affecting the P&L, which is something worth talking about, right? I'm seeing more and more of this. I'm hearing more and more of this. I'm experiencing more and more of this, especially within enterprise contexts. Most enterprises are doing AI wrong, and they're paying the price for it, right? We're buying a lot of tools. I've seen some companies talking about we need to use more AI tokens, we need to have AI adoption everywhere. But unless that's delivering return, it's just more cost. It's just more busy work. It's just more ways of working that don't necessarily deliver real value. So, everyone's talking about AI. What do we do about AI? What does AI mean? But I have a somewhat provocative hypothesis to share with you. I don't think AI is really the issue. I think the real issue we're dealing with extends back much farther than AI and cuts much deeper than AI. And to support that, I have some other statistics I'd like to share with you. In 2018, McKinsey reported that only 16% of digital transformations succeed long term. In 2020, Digital.ai, who ran a huge survey on Agile practitioners every year, reported that only 5% of respondents claim that Agile has made them more adaptable, which is pretty striking when you consider that the whole point of Agile is to be more adaptable. In 2024, BCG reported that only 3% of the companies they had studied qualify as innovation ready. This is not a new story. This idea that some new operating model, some new technology, some new opportunity for innovation presents itself and doesn't actually deliver value. A lot of us have been through this before. So I'm curious. I'm going to push a, a little poll to the audience, which hopefully you can see now. Um, how many of you have been through a failed agile digital or other non AI transformation? How many of you have been through this experience where people show up? We're going to do this big transformation. We're going to go digital. We're going to go agile. We're going to do lean. We're going to do lean Six Sigma. We're going to do some new thing that's going to change everything and make everything better. Most of us have been through these before. I remember working with one company that claimed they had achieved 100% agile adoption. And the way they did this was by changing everybody's titles overnight, not telling them why, and then publishing a big white paper saying that they achieved 100% agile adoption. Woohoo. It created absolute chaos on the ground, which I was brought in to help try to alleviate to the best of my abilities. I see we don't have a ton of votes so far, but the vast majority of you have been through one of these before, which means that you know what the problem is, right? Again, the problem isn't AI. The robots aren't burning our money. They're just helping us burn our own money faster. AI is accelerating a lot of the bad behavior and big problems that we have had at organizations since long before the current frontier models of large language models were introduced, right? These are old problems accelerated by new technology. And the particular problem I have been helping organizations to solve in my last 5 years of work is a problem that I call the low impact death spiral. And this is the situation in which nearly every company I've worked with finds itself, especially larger companies that have been well resourced. This is the big problem. And it goes a little something like this. Product teams deliver low impact work. They deliver those little easy things to do that don't touch the core user experience, that don't invite scrutiny from senior stakeholders, those little extra features we can add, those little extra bits we can do that get celebrated because look how fast we're moving, look at all the stuff we did, but don't actually deliver major improvements across the entire user experience. As a result of this, we wind up with more complicated products. And I think everybody using modern products can experience this, right? Most modern software products feel like a collection of loosely connected features more so than an actual guided and purpose driven experience. Here's where things get really interesting. As our products get more complicated, we wind up with more dependencies and conflicts to manage internally. Suddenly, if we do want to deliver high impact work, if we want to push something to the core experience of the app, if we want to change the onboarding workflow, if we want to change the homepage, suddenly we have 700 fiddly little features we need to consider. How are those going to be affected? Who are the teams we need to coordinate in order to approve these changes? As we deliver more low impact work, the cost of delivering high impact work gets higher and higher. So what do teams do? They deliver more low impact work. This is a self perpetuating dynamic, which is why it is a spiral, right? We go deeper and deeper and deeper into the low impact death spiral until it is essentially impossible for our organizations to truly innovate. Now, what's interesting to me is that I rarely have folks come to me and say, we are shipping too much low impact work. We need to slow down. We need to think more. Usually, folks come to me and just see the dependencies and conflicts and think that those are the root cause that needs to be addressed. I have folks coming to me and saying, we have too many meetings to manage dependencies. We need to get rid of meetings. I have folks coming to me and saying, we need to reorg for better portfolio management because, as those of you who've been through a failed transformation know, reorgs solve all of our problems immediately. And recently, the one I've been hearing is we need more AI to accelerate our teams. Our teams are getting blocked. They're not doing enough work. We need more AI to accelerate them. But what happens when we use AI to accelerate low impact work? The death spiral just gets faster. It spirals faster and faster out of control. Now, not only do we have 700 fiddly features, we have 7,000 fiddly features, each of which was built by a single person using a model that put together code that may or may not work at scale. Now, we not only have the fiddly feature that the team built, we have the version of it that the designer shipped by themselves, the version that the product manager shipped by themselves, the version that the engineers shipped by themselves, and now we have to figure all of this out together. It it does not make things better. I've been experiencing this for a long time. I spent 3 years working with Mailchimp, and I helped their data products team build their first AI-powered product, which was a subject line helper, and this was a classic of course AI will be good here, right? People are writing subject lines. We have access to all this incredible proprietary data. Let's use AI to help people write better subjects. So we built this smart AI subject line recommender, thinking obviously this will make all the metrics go up. It'll be good. It'll be great. Everyone will love it. It turned out that wasn't actually what happened. When we rolled out the first smart version of this, the send rate actually tanked. The percentage of people sending their emails actually went down. And we had to go and do some qualitative research, talk to some humans to understand what was going on. And it turned out that because we had this super smart, super advanced machine model recommending how to write better subject lines, people lost confidence in their subject lines. We would recommend all these smart things you could do, but people started going, "Well, wait, am I bad at writing subject lines? Should I reach out to more people? Maybe this is just too much. Maybe I don't know what to do right now." They got overwhelmed and they abandoned. So what we wound up doing was simplifying, right? We took a look at the metrics we were actually trying to drive. How do we increase the send rate and increase the click through and conversion rates? And we realized that we didn't actually need to make something that smart. We got so caught up and we need more AI. How do we architect it? What's the model? What's the data model? How do we accelerate it? That we didn't think through what we were actually trying to achieve. And once we thought that through, we wound up putting through some much more simplified recommendations that most subject lines passed. So we simplified it. We thought through what the user is actually trying to achieve, how they feel, what they need in that moment. And through that simplification, we were actually able to deliver something that did what we had set out to do. In other words, AI adoption is failing for the same reason that digital transformation and agile and all these other things did. It's putting more layers between the work we do and the goals that matter to our business and our customer. In that Mailchimp example, we got super caught up in AI architecture and AI powered this and AI powered that, rather than saying, what do we need to build to actually help us achieve our customer and business level goals? This has been the big pattern I've been seeing in so much of my work, right? In order for us to do impactful work, we need to draw a connection between business impact, between revenue, between profitability, between growth, and the day to day work we're doing. And most organizations just put a lot of different layers here, right? We'll have our OKRs, our initiatives, our strategies, our bets, discovery. I worked with one company that had misaligned initiatives and bets, and they wound up adding another thing to it because it's always easier to add layers than it is to actually subtract things. And when we look at these big trends in software development, that's exactly what happens. We add them to the middle. We throw some digital transformation on it. We do more agile. We do more AI. But in most cases, we are actually adding distance between the work we do and the desired outcomes of that work. That's why this isn't working. I wrote impact first product teams in the hope that we could draw a direct line between the work that we're doing and the impact of that work. And AI has only made this more important because if we cannot draw this direct line, if we cannot keep the work we do as a team aligned with the goals of the business, then accelerating that work is only going to make things worse. So I want to share with you one concrete set of changes I've coached a lot of teams through because I think it speaks to how this mindset affects the way we approach all of the things we do as product teams. So OKRs are another thing, very trendy right now. Lots of teams talking about OKRs. I'll share with you the way I was first taught to do OKRs, right? You take a company goal, you cascade it down to a department goal, you cascade it down to a bigger team goal, you cascade it down to a team goal. I've worked with some companies that have up to 11 layers of this. They have their L1 OKRs and their L11 OKRs. Again, this is how I was taught to do things when I started working in product. And then I read Christina Wadka's book, Radical Focus, which is a book I highly recommend. And in the second edition of this book, she shares a visual that I am excited to share with you because once you see it, you can't unsee it. She says, don't do this 11 tier cascade because the time you get to the bottom, those goals have nothing to do with what actually matters to the company anymore. We've cascaded this down so far that we have 55 teams that could all achieve their goals, which are no longer really goals. They're mostly just checklists of things to do and may or may not actually help the company do what matters most. What she said is instead, think of the company goal like a center of gravity and have every other team or department, or if you have a different goal or no goal, stay one step away from company goals at all times. Always be able to say in one move, in one mathematical operator, in one why statement, how your team's goals connect to the company's overall goals. Again, once you see this, you can't unsee it because whether you're doing OKRs, KPIs, North Star metrics, whatever framework you ostensibly use, if you're using it well, if you're using it in a way that keeps your work and your goals aligned, it looks and feels more like the picture on the right than like the picture on the left. Now, I worked with a company a while ago, medium sized fintech company that had historically done things this way, which is how most companies do things, especially larger companies. They had their company goal, which nobody on any team could ever really remember. It was, I don't know, somebody said something in a town hall meeting. I'll go and check the video recording. I don't really think about it. Then they had their department goal, which was something, something product excellence. You know, those department goals that sound good, but it's like, okay, what am I supposed to do with that? Be excellent at product rather than terrible at product? Sure, got it. I'll always be sure to do that. By the time it got to the bigger team goal, it was ship some features. And by the time we got to the smaller team, they shipped some features, right? They were left, as most teams are, with a list of things to do and build rather than a clear sense of what success actually looked like for those things. So I came in and started working with this company, and the company said, "We want to do things differently. We have a goal of an additional 50 million a year in recurring revenue, and we want each team to build into that." So I was working with the multi-product platform team. In the past, they had been given products and features to build and told, "Go build this, expand our product to a multi-product platform." They went, they built it, they pointed to the stuff they built. They said, "Look at us, we're doing a great job. We're building all the stuff you told us to build." Now, suddenly, they were being asked to think very differently. They were being asked to say how their work actually contributed to the company's overall revenue goals. And I'll be honest with you, they really struggled with this, and so did I, because it's not easy to attribute revenue to features, right? This is a really, really difficult, challenging conversation. And we started talking, and we talked in circles, and people said this isn't fair. We don't know what to do. And eventually I said, like, well, look, let's assume that the company has some reason for this team existing in the first place, right? They're not just giving you features to build because they feel like it. Why is there a multi-product platform team in the first place? And one of the leaders of this team said, we actually have a good answer to that. Multi-product users have a higher customer lifetime value than single product users. Oh, that sounds like money. Do we know how much higher? And they said, yeah, we actually have a pretty good figure. And I said, okay, could we break down that customer lifetime value, say roughly how much of that we expect to get in a year, and then just put a number together for how many single product users we would need to upgrade to multi product users to kind of feel like we've earned our keep as a team, to feel like we're doing something valuable. And we had all the conversations that teams are likely to have in this moment. Well, that's not fair. It's outside of our control. We have to work with marketing to achieve that. We have to work with all these different teams. We have to work cross functionally. We can't just do it ourselves. It's not just a checklist. There's all these dependencies. And all of that's true, right? But that usually actually means that we're on the right path because we are staying closely connected to our customers, to our markets, to the things that are outside of our control, but ultimately determine our success as a business. So we went back and forth on some different numbers. And finally, we agreed that our team's goal for that year was to upgrade 10,000 single product users to higher customer lifetime value multi product users by the end of the year. And every conversation we had for the rest of our work together started with this goal. How are we moving the needle here? Not how are we building more features, not how are we changing the way we work, not how have we broken this down into 57 strategic initiatives. What are we doing that moves the needle? And can we do anything that moves the needle more? This is the kind of thinking that impact first teams exhibit. Now, through my work with this and other teams, I've come up with a checklist for team goals that I encourage you to bring back to your team level conversations. Number one, are our team goals no more than one step away from company goals? And I encourage you to draw that little orbit and say, can we in one step get from what our team is working towards to what the company at large cares about? Number two, do our team goals involve specific enough timelines and targets to drive subtractive decision making? We'll talk about this in a moment, but one of the areas where I strongly encourage teams to be proactive is to set those targets, even if they're not set for you. Say, we actually seek to deliver this much revenue by this date, to onboard this many users by this date, because it is those specific numbers and timelines that will empower your team to decide which opportunities are worth pursuing and which opportunities are not worth pursuing. And finally, do our team goals involve customer and market dynamics that are outside of our immediate control? Have we resisted the temptation to cascade and control to the point where we are no longer learning from and adapting into our customers and markets? If you'd like this checklist, it is available to you. You can scan this QR code or it's in the resource widget right here in this webinar. So far be it from me to deprive you of some of these valuable resources. Um, Again, the teams I work with that are really delivering value, they don't just think about their goals once a quarter. They don't just think about their goals once a year. They constantly think about their goals because it empowers them to do the subtractive work that actually matters. The AI, the how they build, that starts to disappear into the actual work that they're doing. So again, I told you the story of that team I worked with that came up with this goal of upgrading 10,000 single product users. About a month later, after planning season had passed, one of the product managers on this team came to me and said, I want your help with prioritization frameworks. Should we use ICE? Should we use RICE? Should we use Moscow? What's the best one to use? And I said, look, just talk me through it like I'm a person. Let's just talk about it, right? How do we want to do this? And he said, okay, well, I put together an ICE matrix for three things for A, B, and C. And based on that ICE matrix, I think we should prioritize A. And I'm like, cool, just walk me through these three things, right? Let's start with impact. And he goes, okay, well, the first thing, pretty good impact. I scored it about a 4 out of 10. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. What's a 4? What's a 10? What do these scores mean? He was like, "Well, I made a scoring." I was like, "No, no, no, no. Like, we don't need an arbitrary scoring system. We have a target, right? We know we want to upgrade 10,000 single product users to multi product users. So, what is the most number of multi product users we could reasonably expect to get out of each of these three things?" This is a hot tip for everybody there. Measure impact in the same unit as your impactful team goals. So he said, "I don't know, like it depends. We could do this." I said, "Just give me a ballpark. Again, let's look at orders of magnitude. This doesn't need to be perfect." He said, "Okay, we could probably get about a hundred multi-product users from this." Well, cool. Great. Thank you. What about B? He says, "Well, we scored B second because it has a lot more dependencies. It would be a lot harder to build. There's less confidence. There's more effort." I'm like, "Okay, we'll talk about that later. But like, what's the most impact we think we could have?" He said, "Well, again, it's really tough. We have to rethink a lot of the onboarding journey here and really make sure that people are getting put into the right funnel out of the gate." I'm like, I get it. I get it. But like, what's the impact we could have? How many multi product users do we think we could get?" He was like, "Honestly, right out of the gate, we'd have like 3,000. I'm like, "Okay, cool. Great. Thank you. What about C?" And he goes, "Yeah, C wound up at the bottom because like only 50 people would ever touch it. It doesn't really matter." I'm like, "Okay, great." He goes, "Okay, cool. Let's go on to." I was like, "Wait, before we go any further, like we have a goal here, right? Our goal is 10,000. If the order of magnitude we are trying to achieve is 10,000, then only one of these really feels like it's worth pursuing, right? 100 towards 10,000. Yes, it might be high confidence, it might be low effort, but I feel like the effort we'd spend on that would probably be wasted effort. Again, we've gone through this checklist, we've set goals that are specific enough to help us understand what is worth pursuing. And right now, it feels like exactly one of these things is worth pursuing. And we'll have conversations to have about how we do it, how we scope it, if there's a smaller version, if there's a bigger version, but it feels like one of these paths is worth pursuing right now." He goes, "I hear you, but this isn't an I matrix, this is an ice matrix. We have to talk about confidence and effort." I said, "Okay, great. We can do this real quick. Ready? There's your confidence and your effort. I don't care. I don't care. This is a waste of our time. Because if we waste our time trying to do too many things at once, then we're not ever going to do the things that actually matter." This is playing out in the way that companies adopt AI as well, right? There was a 2025 BCG study that showed that companies with three or fewer AI initiatives are experiencing about twice the ROI versus companies with six or more initiatives. In other words, the folks who are looking at this strategically, who are looking at this from a place of focus and discipline, saying, what are the things that are having impact that are worth putting more resources against? What are the things that we need to accelerate? What are the things that we don't actually need AI for? These are the folks who are taking that same strategic, subtractive, impact first approach, who are actually seeing ROI on their efforts. And let me tell you, this is only going to become more urgent in the months and years that follows. CEOs don't have patience for just throw AI at it anymore. And those who do aren't going to for long. If you are using robots to help you burn and eat money faster, at a certain point, somebody is going to turn around and say, it's not just the robot that's the problem, it's your team that is the problem. Your team is not delivering impact. Team is not justifying its existence in this business. So I want to leave you with one question before I answer your questions, which is the first question I ask in impact first product teams, and probably the most consequential question for any of you to answer. If you were the CEO of your company, would you fund your own team? If you were personally responsible for the market level existential success of the business, would you look at your own team and say, yes, this team is a good investment and I can tell you exactly why and how? Because I promise you that if you can't answer this question, your CEO can't, your CFO can't. The folks who are actually deciding how resources are allocated, none of them are in a better position to answer this question than you are. So I want to give you a little time to just marinate on that question. I've asked many teams that question in my day, and we've had some really interesting decisions made as a result. Thank you for your time. There's that QR code again. Again, you have that link in the resources, so you don't really need to hold your camera up to your computer or take a screenshot or do whatever you do. Um, it's been a pleasure talking to you about this and sharing some silly AI generated videos. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Perfect. Thank you for that insightful talk, Matt. I think a lot of things that you touched upon actually bring back the real dilemmas I think teams are facing every day. And like you said, I think with AI, it's only amplifying a lot of this right now. So
Absolutely.
thank you for it. Was a wonderful talk again.
Yeah, we're still waiting for questions, so please do pop them in the Q&A, folks. Just one thing, Matt, I've heard parts of the talk before, right? And I always love that example you give on the orders of magnitude, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if other folks see the same thing, but it's super interesting the way, you focus specifically on that. This is the actual value that you can bring, right? The impact.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked with a lot of teams. I worked with a team that was building the new version of a B2B hiring management platform. And this was a team that was kind of spun up like a startup within an enterprise. And they were told, go build the new version of this platform. And over time, they had done what they needed to do to kind of isolate themselves from some of the pressures of the organization, but you can only do that for so long. And eventually that isolation was proving to be a liability, not an asset. So I was brought in to help them figure out what success really looked like. And the first question I asked them was, okay, onboard users to the new version of this platform, how many by when? They were like, oh, we can't answer that question. Like we don't know. And I was like, well, then how do you know what to build? Because you build really differently if you want 10,000 users in a week versus if you want 10 customers in a year. So I think a lot of the mindset shift we went through was like, you don't set the target when you have perfect data and perfect information. You set the target so you can make better decisions. So we looked at that and we were like, all right, by the end of the quarter, what is it? Is it 10, 100, 1,000, or 10,000? And it was an engineer on the team who actually said, I think if we could get 1,000 users on the platform, I'd feel like we really earned our keep. So we went back to the CPTO of the company and said, we would like to be accountable for getting 1,000 new users on this platform by the end of the quarter. And the CPTO said, you have my support. And if anyone comes to you and asks you to do anything that gets in the way, send them to me. And I'll tell them that that is not something your team has capacity for. And from there, we could say, all right, well, like, who are the 1,000 we want to focus on? What are the segments? All those really valuable strategic conversations got unlocked once we had committed proactively to the number. So I think, again, it's a new way of thinking and operating for a lot of teams who are often kind of waiting to be given the number. But if you can find an order of magnitude that feels right and commit to it in advance, it puts you in a much stronger strategic position.
Yeah, building on that, Matt, actually, it's a question that comes through very often, right? Which is exactly where do people get started in identifying those data, right? Because I've heard it very often where teams turn around and they say, "I don't have those metrics. We don't have those metrics, or we don't do a great job of measuring it, or it's not clean or anything like that." How do you identify that? And also, how do you avoid that they become vanity metrics, right? Which is,
Yeah.
you know, some people just throw in a vanity metric there.
So for starters, I think that's super real. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I have sat with people on a team at a publicly traded company, asked them what the company's goals are, and wound up with all of us Googling public information to actually understand what's expected of the business at large. Again, we put so many layers and levels and bureaucracies in between individual teams and the company at large that a lot of teams just don't think it's their problem. They're like, well, whatever, like we just build the stuff they told us to build. And what I tell them is like, well, yeah, but if they're not achieving their goals and if you can't speak to why your work is important, then you're putting yourselves in a really risky position. And I wouldn't want to be in that position necessarily if I were you. So I think the first thing is, again, always understanding what are the promises this company has made to the market? What are the ways that the market will evaluate this company? And I think in doing that, we avoid vanity metrics, right? Because those are intrinsically metrics that matter existentially to the business. And they're usually metrics that are outside of our control. It's very rare that a company says, we have promised the market that we're going to build these 87 features. It's much more like, we've promised that we're going to achieve this amount of profitability, or we're going to achieve this amount of recurring revenue. I worked with one startup where we actually got on a call with some of their first round investors and said, what would you need to see from us from a metric standpoint in order to invest in a second round? And that informed every decision we made from there on out. So again, I think a lot of this comes back to having those conversations and understanding what the market at large expects from a business, what your business and funding models are, and how to connect those to the work you are doing as a team.
Yeah, we did get a question here, which is, and I think it's related to that, which is how do you identify early that a team is not doing high impact
Oh,
work?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I've seen this a lot. The first thing I see if a team is not doing high impact work is that they are manufacturing urgency around things that don't matter. So I've been brought in a lot where it's like, this team needs role clarity. They're fighting over who exactly does what, or like, this team needs help coming up with an operating model and a way of working. And honestly, 99 times out of 100, I walk in and a question of role clarity is actually a challenge of goal clarity. If a team knows what they're working towards and feels that pressure to deliver something impactful and outside of their control, suddenly they start doing more discoveries. Suddenly they start working together more effectively. Suddenly these questions of who exactly is responsible for what exactly within a team don't matter as much because teams will naturally self organize if they have specific high impact goals. The analogy I use sometimes is that if you invite all your friends over for dinner and have a really good recipe to cook, nobody's going to argue over who's certified to peel potatoes. You're going to figure it out. If you invite all of your friends over and you say, all right, what do we want for dinner? Then it's going to be a really, really tough conversation. You need to have a clear sense of what success looks like in order for teams to effectively self organize and sort out those questions of how do we work together and what are our roles. If you don't have that clarity of goals, then you're going to spend a lot of time spinning your wheels on operational questions that ultimately don't matter that much.
That brings up follow-up question from my side, Matt. I think that's really a great question, actually, because I think a lot of teams, especially I think as you have multiple layers in any organization, which is true
Yeah.
for most of us, right? How do teams at let's say a developer level or a designer level start to at least move these conversations towards impact first thinking, because that I think is something that most of the folks struggle with a lot, because if it's flowing top down, it's easier
Yeah.
for some of this impact to materialize. But how do you, any ideas on how you can create that impact from bottoms up?
I mean, it all starts with having those conversations at the team level, I think. That's why impact first product teams is structured around powerful questions rather than around frameworks or operating models. I think honestly the first step I've seen a lot of teams take is to begin asking these questions and having these conversations in a way that is more proactive, that is more driven by the team itself. So I'll often ask teams, for example, well, how do your goals factor into your sprint planning ceremonies? And they're like, they don't. Our goals are just something we do once a quarter and give to leadership and pretend to care about. Then we go back to our sprint planning ceremonies and we just think about what we're building. Um, Starting to find more opportunities within your team's day-to-day operating cadences to ask these questions, to make room to talk about why you're doing what you're doing, to track some of those company level goals and be like, hey, how's the company doing? Like, are we on track to achieve things? Could we move some things around? I think those are really important steps to take to begin opening up a different kind of space to have a different kind of conversation.
Yeah, makes sense. And before we move on, I think a couple of things I encourage, team. I think everybody on the chat to actually, post your questions. I know, I think, no, we don't have the chat enabled, but I think please post your questions in the Q&A. If it's on the right side of your window, just take a look at the icons there, and you should see a Q&A window there. Please post your questions there, and we'll take them up. And also, I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the intro. We do have Matt's book giveaway, signed copies, not just regular copies. So please do ask questions. I encourage all of you to ask questions. Maybe you'll have a chance to win the signed copies. We'll ship them to you. And also just if you have any questions, feel free to just ask
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
Signed copy, signed by this pen, by this hand, right here.
And we do
And
have a few questions coming in now. So
yes,
we've right
perfect.
here.
Go ahead. Go.
Hold on. Is there a specific human skill that you feel is undervalued in the AI era that maybe
I have
team members?
always said that facilitation is one of the most undervalued human skills because AI can produce lots of stuff, but getting multiple humans to actually agree and have a shared understanding based in clarity is so hard to do. And again, I think AI is probably going to make it harder because each of us has our robot helper telling us what it thinks we want to hear. So, facilitating multiple humans towards committing to a subtractive decision rather than just using AI to explore more and more and more and more and more and more and more options is going to be super, super, super important and more valuable than ever.
Yeah, that's super important. I like that one. And we have another AI question as well.
Yeah.
How do we avoid using AI just for the sake of it? And I think you touched on this, right? But especially when there are so many tools and it becomes overwhelming to choose.
So, I have a sort of counterintuitive answer to this, which is I found that the best way to avoid using AI just for the sake of it is to use AI enough to know what it's good for. Um, this has been annoying for me because I kind of liked being a hater and being like, I don't use AI for anything. But the more I use it, the more I'm like, oh, okay, it's really useful for these things. It's less useful for some other things. Like literally today, I had a potential, I met this morning with a potential consulting client, and I had my little AI helper go across all of my past engagements, find 3 really good stories to tell, how those tie into their context, how those like what the size of the company is, how it all relates. I was like, "Holy crap, this is amazing." Then an hour before this talk, my AI system said like, "The talk is in 6 minutes. Get ready." And I was like, "The talk is not in 6 minutes." And it said, "You're right. I don't actually know what time it is." So again, I think you see these stories about like AI telling you to walk to the car wash and AI not knowing how many R's are in the word strawberry. And these things are true, but there are also things it's really useful for. And I think having that conversation from a place of experience and knowledge puts you in a better position. So I'd say just like have some fun with it. Again, I've had a good time like making my silly videos and learning more about prompting and how these different things work. And there is fun and acceleration and automation to be had. But I think you need to get hands on with it before you can speak with authority about what is and is not AI for its own sake.
Cool. Now we're going to jump away from the AI and back again
Great.
to impact. And so here we've got another question, which is when you have multiple teams working on the same goal, but see this from different perspectives, how do you distinguish between productive divergence and harmful misalignment? And when should leadership step in to force a decision?
So I'm so glad you asked this because one of the things that happens when you do have that one step away working with goals is that teams do have much more overlap in their goals. They have much more overlap. They have much more dependencies. They have much more interrelated goals. Or rather, they have much more capacity to see and recognize and navigate the ways in which their goals are interrelated or dependent or at cross purposes. So I did a really interesting um, goal setting workshop with a client in December. And part of what we did was we took the company level goals and we had each team come up with goals that were one step away. And what we realized was that in a lot of cases, there were really interesting relationships between these different team goals. So, for example, you might have one team that's kind of working on an awareness funnel, another team that's working on conversion within that funnel. And when those teams understand the relationship between their different goals, because of how they all connect to the company's overall goals, and they can say, oh, well, okay, like if we just move this needle a little bit, then it amplifies it by this much. And if you work on this at this much, like if we get this many more people in the door at our current conversion rate, that matters a lot. But if we can improve this part of the product so that the conversion rate's higher before we go out and bring those new users in, then that means that our yearly targets move from this to that. So I think, that conversation about productive divergence versus harmful misalignment, it's a really important conversation to have. And it's a conversation that usually gets obscured by too many layers of cascading. So to me, success doesn't mean that the way that we approach our goals means that we never have to have that conversation. It means we have that conversation sooner, more frequently, and in a more focused and specific way. And within those specific conversations, we sometimes realize, I've worked with a team a while ago where every time we tried to kind of do the math and figure it out, we were like, the purview this team has just isn't impactful enough. Like, there's no way this team can do what really matters to the business. So let's have them support another team for the next quarter, or let's have them change their purview a little bit. Again, the conversations that shake out of this are not easy or straightforward or, frankly, automatable discussions. But that's why we have people. That's why we have those leaders to come in and force a decision. Because again, once we see the way these things are connected, we see that it's always messier than we thought or hoped. And it's within the sense making of that mess that we often make the most important and highest stakes decisions.
Fantastic. And that's a brilliant question again. I think
Yeah, really good question.
brings up a lot of different aspects of management in a sense, right? It's the same question that I was asking before as well, right? Um, I think anchoring on impact probably helps everybody align. I think, but the step towards that is, and shouldn't be expecting this overnight to happen, especially
Yeah.
when you are used to cascading workflows and stuff. For us to switch to this, I think do you have any tips, Matt, from moving from this cascading workflows to impact first thinking that folks could start to at least socialize more in the teams so that this
Yeah. So
ideas
I,
percolate a little bit more.
what I will say is that most teams can't change the way their company sets goals, right? So I want to be very clear. I'm not saying go back to your company and say, I'm not going to use your L11 OKRs. Like, your OKRs are bad. Change the way the whole company does planning. That's probably not going to happen. But you can say, like, yes, and, right? So my team has these L11 OKRs, and we believe that this is the impact that we're going to be seeking to drive through them. So the fact that it's easier to add than to subtract works against us in a lot of ways, but it tends to work for us when it comes to shifting the way our team works. So again, you usually can't get a company to change the entire way it does planning, but you can start to add in your team's own way of thinking about, talking about, understanding, contextualizing that plan. And then often, in many cases, that means you're actually kind of spending more time planning, right? We can't change the yearly cadence, but we can add a quarterly cadence. We can add a monthly cadence. We can check our progress more often. That's what this really looks like in practice.
Makes sense. Thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
who go next
we have
question?
two final questions. Let's see if we can get these out. And this one's a hard one, or not a hard one. It's a nice little challenge. So, do you have examples of how it can be done in Project Mindset Cement Company undergoing a digital transformation? Here, the product isn't digital, but digital becomes present in every phase of the journey.
So I went through this with a cardboard box company a while ago. There was a really interesting story there where basically they were like, we build cardboard boxes. And the guy I interviewed from this company said, like, yeah, we're obviously not a digital company. We're a cardboard box company, but we spent the time understanding our customers' pain points enough that we understood the digital solutions they needed. So they weren't like, we're going to have AI powered cardboard boxes. They talked to warehouse managers and found out that the biggest problem they had was if you have an order with 50 cardboard boxes and one of those cardboard boxes goes missing, you might have to sort of reproduce everything that's in all 50 of those boxes if those are all dependent upon each other. So they built a prototype by just using simple Amazon location aware sensors to show that, like, hey, look, if we can track the location of your cardboard boxes, then you'll find that 50th box and you won't have to redo the entire run. I really like that story because it shows how, again, the fundamentals of product work still very much hold. They went out and found out what the opportunity space was from their customers and then said, okay, this is the problem. The solution happens to be a digital solution, but not like we have to do something with digital. And again, I think that when you look at transformations, those transformations need to be led by the changes in the world that our customers inhabit. Changes in need reflect changes in solution. But if we start by understanding those changes in need, which frankly most companies pushing out AI stuff don't think about or care about at all, then that gives us a chance to actually grow into the evolving market rather than trying to force our will on that market unsuccessfully.
And that ties in really nicely to the last question. Hold on a sec. Let me just, where it's how do you handle leadership mandates to adopt AI when the connection to the user or business impact is weak or unclear?
Yeah, so again, I think it's all about connecting it to business goals, right? Say like yes and your way through it. Don't be like no. Be like okay, cool. Let's identify one opportunity where we think AI could really accelerate our business impact. Because again, there are such opportunities. There are things that AI is good for. I use them every day. There are also things that AI is bad for. And again, if we haven't done the work of really understanding what goals we're working towards, then AI can only accelerate destructive busy work. So we can hopefully use this as a way to open up that conversation and say, yes, we agree that AI is a powerful, valuable technology. Let's make sure we're applying it to the one correct thing where it will actually be a good purpose fit way to accelerate the impact we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I like
Awesome.
it. And it's a good way to close off. Sorry, Pragati.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I was just saying, I think we're coming on. I mean, thanks again for the time and answering, going through all the questions, right? We people are getting enthusiastic and they're starting to throw. So, folks, also reach out to Matt as
Yeah,
well, right?
you know where to
Ping
find
him
me.
questions, and please pick up a copy of his books, all books, right? All of his books.
All of my books,
Really
all
good
of them,
read.
even the one
Exactly,
about Agile.
exactly, all of them, right? No, but it was super interesting, and we really appreciate you being here. You want to add anything, Pragati, before we close off?
No, I think, I just wanted to thank you again, Matt. This was very useful. And especially, I think, even for the folks at Nagarro, I think, this is really impactful for all the teams across the board. I think, it's important for us to, anchor on, especially with all of the hype around AI and, what it changes for us in terms of priorities and stuff. I think it goes back to the same thing. I think, at the end of the day, I think we are building products for people until machines take over. I think until that happens, I think, we should really, think about what we're trying to build, and, what impact we are trying to create as individuals as well as teams. I think that will help us anchor some of this thinking. And Matt, can't thank you enough for spending the time with us today.
My
And
absolute pleasure.
thank
Thanks so
you.
much for having me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a quick reminder again for folks. I think, we will continue to have these sessions. Hopefully, I think, this session help you, unlock some of the thinking, and you'll be able to tackle these challenges, much better than, what you did before. So, Hugo, anything to add here before we close out?
No, I just want to say, right, like, please do sign up if you want future events. We're getting an incredible lineup, just like Dan and Matt, who were gracious enough to join us for the first 2 episodes. And we really want you to think about how you're developing products, right, with consciousness and developing the right things. And let's create impact and value for our customers and our clients and our organizations. And with that, right, I think we're closing up.
Yeah,
And
Matt, any
appreciate.
final word?
Just that it's a weird time right now. A lot of weird conversations flying around. I hope everyone's hanging in there and taking care of themselves and each other. And I hope you'll keep in touch.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much, everyone.